In 1919, at least 17 Russian families moved to the Sheridan area. They belonged to the Mulligan Church. Mulligan, loosely translated, is dairy eater, the name given for their belief that it was permissible to eat dairy products during Christian fast. They did not drink, smoke, eat pork, or fish without scales. Because they did not follow exactly the beliefs of the Russian Orthodox Church, they were considered heretics and persecuted. The early 1900s saw major turmoil in Russia. It was the beginning of the Russian Revolution, a period of political and social change across the Russian Empire, with the abolishment of the monarchy and the establishment of the Soviet Union. When the Bolsheviks gained control of the government, the Mulligan Church was forced to move underground. Just before World War I, many of the Russian families moved to the Bay Area, Russian River, Potter Valley, and Mendocino areas. It was the Bay Area group that had the idea of starting a colony in Sheridan. During World War I, they had worked in San Francisco for good wages, in machine shops, riveting building ships, and on the docks and other jobs. The family saved as much money as possible. Max Popov, the patriarch of the group, decided to start the Mulligan Church and Agriculture Colony near Sheridan. He had learned the wide open space and farmland around the town from his son James, who had left home earlier and lived in the Sheridan area. Sheridan reminded Popov of the landscape near Kursk, Russia, with its slow rolling hills and terrain. Max Popov was highly respected by his neighbors as an honest, upright citizen. He wore a flowing white beard and a kartus, a Russian cap with a visor, like the actor wore in the movie Fiddler on the Roof. As matriarch and spiritual leader, he was affectionately known as Torkuska, or grandfather to the other members. In Russia, he was one of the few people who could read and write. He helped poor people and spoke several different languages, including Turkish, Armenian, Slovakian, Russian, and then English. Popov was the minister of the Sheridan Mulligan Church for several years. When the families first came to the Sheridan area, they were under a cloud of suspicion. Years earlier, a colony of Russian anarchists known as the Aurora Colony had settled in the Mount Pleasant area. I'll talk more about them at the end of this section. Each family purchased large acreage for farming. The group built the Mulligan Church and established the Russian Colony Cemetery in 1922. John Saracroft, when a young man, drove horse and buggy loaded with lumber many miles to where the present church site is. The land for the church was donated by William Boganoff. Establishment of the cemetery was spurred by the death of a young Russian girl. Because she was Russian, she was not allowed to be buried in the American cemetery. So Max Popov, along with a group of Russian families, built a cemetery. The little girl was the first to be buried there. They must have held hurt feelings for many years. The Russian section was not deeded over to the cemetery district until 1970. There were 17 families listed on the original colony members of Sheridan. Many of the names are still recognized to older Western Plaza residents and include Popov, Smirnov, Boganov, Leskatov, Korbanov, Suzov, Sovinskin, and Sarakov. It did not take long for the members to become part of the community. They were hardworking and did not share the anarchist view of the Aurora Colony. Their children attended Sheridan and Valley View School, and many graduated from Lincoln High School. Many of the children would later serve in World War II. Here's a picture of young Willie Boganoff at Valley View School. Willie was a good friend of my family and would often stop and have coffee with my parents. Here is a picture at the Valley View reunion with him on the right-hand side. This is a picture of his father William and uncle Andrew. Nick Luskatoff and his parents were later immigrants. He and his father before him owned the auto repair shop in Sheridan for many years. Nick was born April 10, 1943, in Iran. His parents had escaped communist oppression by walking out of Rostov, Russia, spending 13 years in refugee camps in Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. In 1949, the family qualified to enter America through Ellis Island and traveled by train to Sheridan, joining their sponsored relatives. Nick attended Sheridan Grammar School, followed by Lincoln High School, and continued to receive a BA in mathematics from San Francisco State. Nick was drafted in the Army and served in Vietnam, where he received a Combat Infantry Badge, Army Commendation Medal, and a Bronze Star. He owned the Sheridan Garage for many years. The Russian immigrants worked hard and survived the Depression of the 30s. They were our neighbors and ordinary people raising their families. Some of the Russian descendants I knew were the Sarakov family in Wheatland. They owned many acres of orchards and farmland, and actually they purchased my family's property in Wheatland. Max Popov was the janitor at Sheridan School when I attended. George Suzoff had cattle and worked for Caltrans during the mid-70s when they widened Highway 65. Some of the second-generation families have passed away and their children have moved away. The little Russian Mullican church still stands in town of Sheridan. In 1959, approximately 21 families in Sheridan and Wheatland area worshiped there. It's still at the intersection of Andresen and Rioso roads and is occasionally used. Not at all affiliated with the Sheridan Russian families was the Aurora Colony, founded by Abraham Isaac. Abraham Isaac was a newspaper editor in Russia and an anarchist. Anarchists do not believe in organized government and aspire to a socialist view. They can vary from a passive to violent overthrow of the government. Isaac got in trouble for his views, and he fled the Tsar's police for Rio de Janeiro in 1889. In 1890, he moved to the United States and lived in San Francisco and then Portland, Oregon. In Portland, Isaac became a member of the Socialist Labor Party and founded the Anarchist Weekly publication. In Portland, authorities closed the Anarchist Weekly on obscenity charges for him publishing Walt Whitman's A Woman Waits for Me. After reading Whitman's work, I'm sure it had more to do with his political views than the work. Abraham Isaac faced more serious problems when he was propelled into the national headline when Leon Krzyzewski shot U.S. President William McKinley in Buffalo, New York on September 6, 1901. Isaac had met the would-be assassin days earlier in Chicago. Anarchists across the country were arrested and jailed. Without a clear connection, Isaac was eventually released in September. In 1909, Abraham Isaac and his wife formed the anarchist-inspired Aurora Colony near Mount Pleasant area of Lincoln, California. The 150-acre farm was divided into 25 parcels, and about 19 families settled there. They lacked farming experience, and severe freezing killed their citrus trees, and infighting led to the colony's demise. After the Aurora Colony broke up, Isaac stayed on the property, and he became a member of the Farm Bureau and other civic organizations. Isaac died of acute pancreatitis on December 10, 1937. 4 years before his death, Isaac had written a friend. First, the railroad took our pears and plums, and $70 to boot. The good Lord took our citrus by frost, and 2 weeks ago, the Bank of Lincoln closed its doors, and I lost our savings.